Of all the training sessions in this series, this one may be the most important because it lays the foundation for how Denari is designed. If you don't understand how Denari uses codes, you will find it difficult to get the information back in the form of reports later on. Therefore, anyone new to Denari must start here. Codes are simply ways to tag a piece of information. For example, at some point we may want to get a report giving us a list of all the people who have blue eyes. We can first create or set up that code in our database and then assign that to all those people in the data who have blue eyes. We can then easily produce a report giving us that list just by telling the database to grab those names with that code. Tomorrow we may need a report showing all the people in our data with brown eyes, so we can have a code for that as well, and so on. All databases group information as entities, which is a fancy way of saying that the information that is similar is all stored together. In Denari you'll find names, gifts, pledges, sponsored names, field agents, and many other entities. Each of these have their own set of codes, and it's important to differentiate between them. There are gift codes, name codes, pledge codes, etc. These three groups are the biggies, so we'll start with those. So let's go ahead and start with gifts. There are two main codes that are common to all gift records. In fact, Denari requires that every gift you enter into Denari has both of those. First is the appeal code. It tracks where the gifts come from. It answers the question, what fundraising function generated this gift? Each time you initiate a fundraising function like a golf tournament, a speaking engagement, a special letter that you send out, etc., you will create an appeal code to represent the gifts that are raised as a result. Coding your gifts with appeal codes allows you to get a list of gifts that were raised by each event or function. It allows you to evaluate the success of those functions, and if you have staff members who are responsible for fundraising, track their progress. Let's look briefly at how we set up an appeal code. First, we're going to go to the Gifts tab in Denari. The reason we go to the Gifts tab is that for the most part, the appeal code is a gift code, and so all things that are related to gifts are going to be found on the Gifts tab. And so we'll click that Gifts tab, and we'll come down here to appeal codes. Yours will probably just say appeal codes. And so we'll click that link, and here we see a list of all the appeal codes that are already in our data. And so we can click on one of these and edit this if we want to. We're going to go ahead and click on Add New to create a new one. The first thing we're going to do is give the code a description. The description tells us what this appeal code is about. It can be anything we want it to be. So we're just going to call this training video. Now when we see this on the list later on, if we come back to that list we were just on a second ago, we'll know exactly what this is about. Or better yet, if somebody comes to our data 10 years from now and looks at this, and maybe you're no longer working for the organization, they'll be able to tell what this is about as well. You can use anything you want in this field. You can use letters and numbers. You can use slashes and dashes and other characters. The appeal code is also, you'll notice, is a required field. You know it's required because it has that little red star there. The appeal code is for Denari. It tells Denari that this appeal code, the training video appeal, is different than any other code found in Denari. And so it has to be unique. And by the way, these rules for this appeal code applies to any record that you set up in Denari. So the appeal code, you can use letters and numbers. You can use spaces and dashes and things like that, but it's really not proper. So Denari will let you get away with it, but in reality it should be something really simple and to the point. And again, it's mostly for Denari more than it is for you. However, you do have the ability to create schemes, if you will, of codes. So for example, if you were a missionary organization, you could start all of your missionary codes with the letter MS and then have other numbers and letters in that code that represent something. So you can do that if you want to, but again, from Denari's perspective, this really is just for Denari. And those are really the only two fields that we have to use here. We can save this at this point and it's ready to use. All of the other fields on this page are optional. We're going to look briefly at them. The first one being the beginning date. That is just an informational field. It doesn't show up on reports anywhere. You can't filter by that field. It just simply tells you when this event took place or this fundraising function took place. The insulated checkbox is really something that can be defined by you. In other words, Denari doesn't have a specific purpose for the term insulated, so you can make this whatever you want it to be. It's just simply a way to tag certain gifts. So if a gift comes in and you want to be able to produce a report later on, say get a list of all the insulated gifts that are insulated by appeal code, then you can go ahead and check that box, and any gift then that links to this appeal code will be considered insulated. We also have across from here the active checkbox. That simply means that this appeal code is now available to be linked to a pledge or a gift. As soon as we make this inactive by unchecking the box, it then shows up or doesn't show up, for example, in the drop-down list in gift entry. When you're entering a gift, you click the drop-down field for appeal codes, and you won't find this one here. And so it cleans up your list a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to use. The campaign ID we're going to come back and talk about in more detail in a few minutes, but basically this is where you would link an appeal to a campaign. And a campaign is simply a way to group a bunch of appeal codes together. And so this is the field that provides that link to the campaign. And so you would click the little question mark, select the campaign that you want this linked to, and that then allows you, as I said, to do a report at the campaign level, which could group a bunch of appeal codes together. Down here we have a field for the GL code. The GL code is really also like the beginning date, just an informational field. Again, you can't filter on that. It doesn't print out anywhere. It just tells you or reminds you that you might have an expense account related to the GL code or to this appeal code, for example, and so you can put that code here as a reminder. These fields, the number of pieces, the production cost, the postage cost, goal, etc., all these fields here all relate to mailings. And so there is a report in Denari called the Campaign Performance Report that would report this information back to you. So you can come here and fill in the information that is the actual cost information, and that report will show you the money raised by this appeal compared to the cost. But again, this is pretty much just related to mailing type things. However, I have seen some of our clients, for example, put something in the postage cost field. It's not necessarily postage, but just put a cost there so that they can get that report to show the cost benefit analysis. The fields below, the kit and the NDA rental list, you probably won't even see. There are also other fields on down here that we'll talk about later on. But basically, that's all we need to know now in terms of setting up our appeal code, and we're ready to go. We're just going to come up here and we're going to click Save, and this one's ready to use. The second required gift code is the fund code. The fund code tracks where the money is going or what you are going to spend it on. It's the thing for which you are raising the money. So quite often, although it is not a hard and fast rule, your fund codes will parallel your accounting system. You'll have far fewer fund codes than you will appeal codes, because each time a new fundraising function is performed, you will create an appeal code, but you won't create new fund codes very often. So let's take a look at how we create a fund code. Again, this is a gift-related code, so we're going to go to the Gifts tab. We'll come down here in the Setup section and find Fund Codes. Again, we're seeing the list of fund codes that are already created, and we're using the training data here, by the way, so you might see some goofy things here that people have created along the way. We're going to go ahead and click Add New, and we're going to give it a description. So again, I'll just put in here Training Class Fund, and again we see the fund code. So the code rule applies here just as we saw with the appeal code. The description field is for us, the fund code is for Denari. The OLC description field is only applies in very limited settings where if you're using online community. Department is very similar to campaign in that you can group a bunch of fund codes together by department, and so here we would link this fund code to that department, which then gives us the ability to come back and run a report by department that would present the giving figures for a number of fund codes. Over here we've got the canceled checkbox. Now this actually works exactly the opposite from the appeal code. If you remember over there, that was an appeal code, and we would uncheck the box. And the way I think of this, we see the question mark here, so it's really asking the question, is this canceled? And by checking the box, we're saying yes, it is. And so when we check that box again, it disappears off of the drop-down lists, and we don't have to see it. It's not deleted or removed, but it's still in the data, but we just don't have to see it on a regular basis. And we can come back and uncancel this anytime we want to. Sales revenue indicates anything that we would sell. So for example, let's say you're selling t-shirts or CDs or something like that. You could create a fund code that represents that. So we could have a CD fund code or a t-shirt fund code, or we could just have one big kind of umbrella fund code for everything called sales or something like that. And when we check this box and then link a gift to this fund code, Denari then recognizes that this is a sales type item. And there are a number of reports in Denari that will not include that information. So for example, there is a gift summary by fund that is really a fundraising type report. And so since Denari is focused on fundraising, it's not going to include anything that is sales revenue. And so if that's useful for you, you can check that box and use that there. Again, we see the insulated checkbox. Works exactly like the appeal code, except we're just applying this to a fund code. And once again, you decide what insulated means for your organization and use this how you see fit. We have the same thing over here for the restricted fund. Again, Denari has no hard and fast definition. You define what you mean by restricted. To give you an example, we have clients who, for example, use foundation gifts, and they want to call those restricted. And so they just check that little box, and then any gift that comes in from a foundation, they link to this fund code. That then allows them to produce a report, either including all of the restricted funds or excluding restricted funds from the output. And so it just gives you that flag or that ability to group those gifts together as restricted funds. The notes field is the same. We didn't talk about this over in the appeal code setup, but I'll talk about it here because it applies the same across the board. It is really helpful to put something in the notes field for somebody who comes along 10 years from now. As I said earlier, you may not be working for the organization in 10 years. And so somebody comes along and they're trying to figure out what this fund code's about, and they have the description field, but it's even more helpful if you have some notes in there. But this is just for you. Anything you want to put in that notes field about this fund code, you can use that field. Down here we have this section called accounting information, and this primarily is used with the QuickBooks export, and there are a couple of other accounting programs that Denari will prepare an export file for as well. But here you put in the GL or the general ledger number from your accounting system. Let's just call it QuickBooks. Over here, this is called the class, and when you're using QuickBooks, classes has to be turned on, and both of these fields are required if you're going to use that QuickBooks export. So you'll have the GL here and the class over here for that fund in QuickBooks. And then here we have an administrative percentage. That simply, again, works in that QuickBooks export function. If, let's say, we put a 5 in here, we'll say that we have, basically what that's saying is then any money that is linked to this fund code is going to have 5% deducted and put into a different fund during the QuickBooks export. Not in Denari, but simply as it hits QuickBooks. And that'll be explained in another video that covers QuickBooks, but that's the idea of it. And so if you're not doing that, if that percentage is not important to you, you can just simply leave that blank. So let's stop here and we'll pick this up in session 2.